Welcome back to Murder in the Black. It is your host, Steph.
And I'm MD.
Let's go ahead and get into our true crime case for today.
So grab your coffee if it's the morning, your lemonade if it's the afternoon, and your wine if it's the evening. But either way, let's get into it. So our true crime case for today is going to be entitled A Jealous Rage of Murder, and it's the case of Aniya Mack. Loretta Rankin Bailey was extremely close to her daughter, Aniya. They talked all the time on the phone, even though Aniya was away at college in Michigan and Loretta was in Louisiana. That's why it was very strange that the last time she heard from her daughter was June 24th, 2018. She had left several voicemail messages for her daughter, and she still hadn't heard back from her. She was at her wit's end and ready to call the police when one of her closest friends called her. She picked the phone up thinking, possibly this is Aniya, to tell her some great reason why she had not heard from her. However, it was simply one of Aniya's closest friends, asking Loretta when the last time she spoke to Aniya. Now, her friend shared with Loretta that he was very concerned because not only had their friend group not heard from Aniya for a couple of days, but when he called to check up on her at her job said that she no called, no showed. Now, this raised major flags for Loretta and her friends because Aniya loved her job. After all, it was in line with what she wanted to do in life. Loretta thanks her friend and hangs the phone up immediately and calls Aniya's boyfriend, Donovan Lewis. Donovan tells Loretta that the last time he saw Aniya was on Saturday, June 23rd, when he went to her apartment to hang out. But the last time he spoke with her was Sunday, June 24th, when she told him that she was headed to the church to speak to the Reverend Strickland. Now, we're going to call him Pastor Strickland because one, it's easier, and two, that's the name that his parishioners called him. So Donovan explains to Loretta that Aniya told him she had a meeting with Pastor Strickland. Now, armed with this new information, Loretta calls Pastor Strickland, and although they do not know each other and never met, she inquires on whether he has heard or seen Aniya. The pastor tells Loretta that he did meet with Aniya on Sunday early afternoon to discuss an upcoming choir performance, but that was the last time he had heard or seen from her. The pastor promises Loretta that he would put out a message to the congregation letting them know to reach out if they had heard or seen from Aniya. Increasingly anxious about the whereabouts of her daughter, around 1:30 a.m. on Thursday, June 28th, Loretta exhaustively calls the Kalamazoo police and notifies them of her daughter's disappearance and requests a welfare check. Before we dive into what, if anything, the police found at Aniya's apartment, Steph, why don't you tell us a little bit more about who Aniya was?
24-year-old Aniya Mack was born on February 8, 1994 to Loretta Rankin Bailey and Anthony Mack. She was described as the brightest light in the room. In high school, she was a part of the National Honor Society. Do they have that anymore?
They do.
Okay.
They still have the National Honor Society.
I don't hear it as often as I used to back in the day.
Yeah.
She also was a part of the cheerleading squad. She was the captain of the Majorettes. Aniya was both beauty and brains. She loved dancing, singing, and to step out with makeup, and her hair was on point. She had her priorities in line for high school as far as I'm concerned. She was also very intelligent. She attended Western Michigan University, where she maintained a high GPA even with only one semester until graduation. She had a 3.8 GPA. She was doing her thing.
She really was, because she was very active like very outgoing, very active, and yet a 3.8. I mean, she only had one semester left. That's amazing.
Yeah. Because that's usually when even if you do have a high GPA, sometimes you slack in your senior year. Aniya loved her family, and she was very close with her mom and 6 brothers and 6 sisters. She also had a passion for helping others, particularly children, which is what spurred her decision to major in psychology in college. Outside of her outgoing and charismatic personality, Aniya was known for her strong faith in the Lord. Even while away in college, Aniya found a local church, Second Baptist Church, and made sure that she was active and involved.
Steph, before you keep going, I mean, what are your thoughts about the fact that she's in college and, Michigan's her home, but she's still away from her family and she finds a local church? I think that's pretty admirable. What do you think about that?
I definitely think it just speaks to her commitment because, when I was away at Tuskegee, I went to chapel, but I definitely didn't find a local church. So it means that she was hungry for that and she went to go find it. She sought it out for herself. She was a part of the choir and attended many of the church's activities. It was at Second Baptist Church where Aniya met Donovan Lewis. Donovan Lewis and Aniya shared similar goals and values, and that is what attracted them to each other. They both valued their faith and being active in church, prioritized their education, family, and friends. Most of all, they both wanted to help others. Donovan attended Kalamazoo Valley Community College, where he played basketball while pursuing his education. Donovan was driven, and the relationship between him and Aniya underscored their determination to push each other to greatness. With just one semester left of school, Aniya was focused on graduation, finishing strong, starting her budding career, working with autistic children, while Donovan recently graduated with his associate's degree and started coaching a youth team at the YMCA. Things were going well with the couple. Neighbors of Aniya commented just how happy the two seemed. This always makes me nervous. I'm always like, were they happy?
Were they? But were they really?
Let's see. But in the early morning hours on Thursday, June 28th, 2019, the Kalamazoo police were headed to Aniya's apartment complex to check on Aniya's welfare. No one had heard from her for several days, and when she no called, no show at her job, her friends and family knew something was possibly wrong.
The police arrived at her apartment, but of course no one answered. They solicited the help of the building superintendent, who provided them with access into Aniya's apartment. On the surface and at, initial glance, nothing seemed terribly unusual. However, they did notice that it was likely that Aniya recently had company. And they felt that way because they saw many bottles of alcohol opened in her apartment, just laying around, like in the open, like the living room area and also in her bedroom. As they looked closer, they noticed blood on the wall. They weren't able to determine if these stains were old or new, or if they belonged to Aniya. According to their procedure, they called in the homicide detectives. The detectives performed a thorough crime scene analysis, revealing blood stains in the carpet, and their luminol testing revealed that someone tried to clean up what appeared to be a bloody crime scene. However, this evidence doesn't necessarily point to Aniya's death, just that someone unknown, lost a lot of blood recently. Detectives cut a small portion of the carpet and sent it over for further testing in hopes that it would point them to a person. Detectives engaged neighbors to find out who Aniya possibly entertained in the last few days. Did they spot her with anyone? Did they see her talking to anybody unusual? But the neighbors didn't have any concrete information to provide other than, Aniya had a boyfriend and his name was Donovan, and they seemed very happy. However, they couldn't tell police if they had saw him in the days leading to her disappearance. Now, around the same time that the police were headed to Aniya's apartment to do this welfare check, Donovan made a strange Facebook post on his page that he quickly deleted. But it said, "I apologize for anyone that looked up to me and loved me." Some of Aniya's friends noticed this post before Donovan deleted it. So you know they did what we do. They screenshot it and quickly called the police, notifying them that, hey, this guy looks a little suspect. He made this real suspicious post. You may want to go check him out.
At Aniya's apartment, police start looking for Donovan because we got to talk to him. But they don't have to look long because Donovan appears almost out of nowhere and says, "Just take me in, man. We'll talk about it on the way. I killed my girlfriend." Like, okay, Donovan. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, Donovan was, and the thing about it is Donovan and Aniya actually didn't live together. He lived with his grandmother. Aniya had her own apartment. When he appeared out of nowhere, we mean he literally appeared out of nowhere. They're doing their regular analysis of the apartment complex, and here comes Donovan just saying, "Hey,
I'm here, take me in, I did it." Now, this is very unusual for police. They usually have to hunt people down and make them come in. And even when they make them come in, they don't talk. But, he was doing all of the above. To have a person not even identified as a suspect yet come forward and confess to a crime they weren't even sure occurred, but Donovan's conscience wouldn't allow him to rest until he confessed. And the story that he painted for detectives left them and soon the Kalamazoo community in shambles. Donovan was brought down to the station where he waived his Miranda rights, as you suspect, right? Because he was willing to talk before. And he immediately told officers everything that happened on June 24th, 2018. What detectives would now learn would be Aniya's last day alive. Donovan stated that he went to Aniya's apartment to hang out, and they were drinking and watching TV. After a couple of drinks, Donovan decided he was going to confront Aniya. Donovan had uncovered some evidence that Aniya was cheating on him, and he had been holding on to it until the right time to address it with her, because the right time was when that truth serum was flowing through his body.
Absolutely. It was after he had got a little bit of confidence from said alcohol.
Yes. For some time now, Donovan believed that Aniya was cheating on him with, drumroll please, Pastor Strickland, but he never had proof. All he knew was that the relationship seemed off and highly inappropriate. Aniya was increasingly meeting with him. They recently traveled to Mississippi together, and Pastor Strickland would pick her up and give her rides. And recently, Pastor Strickland gave her a Chevy Malibu to use. But all of these red flags were easily written off by Aniya. By this time, as he sat in Aniya's apartment drinking, he knew he found something that Aniya would no longer be able to deny. He found text messages from Pastor Strickland to Aniya, and he recorded a video of them with his phone.
Now, confident off that truth serum, he calls out Aniya's affair and presents her with the text message. Now, he presents her with several text messages, but one of the text messages read, and I quote, "No, I'm trying to give you the best D of your life, but you running from it." Fill in the blank on what D is. Aniya, appalled, tells him, "You have it wrong. I'm not messing with him." She explains that she is blackmailing Strickland, which is why he paid her rent and bought her a cell phone. She said, "He is doing this so I don't tell his wife." This is all what Donovan says that she said. Okay, so we don't know for a fact that she said this. This is just what Donovan says happened. Now, Aniya's response sends Donovan into a blind rage. He begins beating Aniya in the back of her head, and once she is on the ground, he goes into the kitchen, grabs a knife, comes back, and slits Aniya's throat so deep she begins to bleed out. Once Donovan sees her blood, he tells the detectives that he comes back to reality and panics. At that point, he says he grabs bags to cover her face, hand, and feet, and then stuffs her petite body into a suitcase. Then he looks around at the bloody crime scene and decides, I need to clean this up. He attempts to clean it up and grabs the suitcase and drives to Comstock Creek, which is a creek that, if you live in Kalamazoo, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but it's on the outskirts of town, and it's a prime place to dispose of a body.
When you say a prime place, is it like Just a lot. Is it a wooded area? Is it enough to conceal bodies? Like
Yes,
that type of thing?
it's wooded, it's secluded, it's not something that most people go to. Like, people are not going to just, oh, let's go to Comstock Creek.
Right.
Yeah. So it's kind of and it's desolate, like just no one goes there. So it was like not a place that I think, even had he not come forward, that detectives would have readily reviewed, right? It's not close to where she lives. So it's not something that would have easily been identified. The police inhale after hearing Donovan's dump of all this information, and they want to ensure that they can get everything from Donovan, so they ask him lead them to the body, and he does. Aniya was found just like he said she would be, stuffed in a suitcase with her throat slit. Due to the temperatures of the water, and ironically being stuffed in the suitcase, there was no decomposition to Aniya's body, even though she had been in there at that point for about 3 to 4 days. Within hours of her reported disappearance, Aniya's body was uncovered and her killer was in custody, with a motive that baffled the police, not because a motive of jealousy was uncommon, but because the person in this triangle affair was a big-time community activist whom the Kalamazoo Police Department worked closely with, Reverend Strickland. They couldn't believe it, but they did their due diligence in spite of it and investigated the allegations that Donovan laid out in the interrogation.
When they spoke with Reverend Strickland, he vehemently denied the allegations. He stated that their church typically gave money to parishioners in need, provided access to cars to those without, and helped in any way they could someone who attended their church. Aniya was no different. He told the police the trip to Mississippi was a trip for the entire choir, not just Aniya. But when confronted with the text messages he sent Aniya, he simply stated that multiple people have access to my phone. I'm not sure how those messages were sent, because anybody could have sent them, according to him. He had a statement for everything. He had an explanation for every single thing the police threw at him. And upon further digging, investigators could not corroborate whether Aniya and Reverend Strickland were having a sexual relationship. All they were able to surmise is that the relationship was highly inappropriate. One of Aniya's friends shared with the police that Aniya confided in him that the pastor was making inappropriate advances, but nothing ever came of that. She never did anything with the pastor. And so at the end of the day, it's not even clear whether Donovan had the details right. He claims he was insane at the time of the killings, and that was his defense, insanity. But the definition of legal insanity is it's a mental illness or defect that prevents someone from understanding their actions or distinguishing right from wrong. In this case, I don't think Donovan could win on a legal defense argument because everything he did after suggests he knew what he did was wrong. He covered her body, stuffed her in a suitcase, and dumped her into a creek. He knew that all of this was wrong. So, MD, what do you think about heat of passion and how that falls into the law and the definition of that?
So I think that what he initially was aiming for or trying to get at when he was sitting down with the police officers, and what I think Donovan really believed in, is that it was out of a heat of passion, out of this blind rage of how she continued to deny it, despite him feeling like he had this slam dunk evidence, that sent him into a tailspin and caused him to hit her and then inevitably kill her. And that argument likely could have stood the legal insanity defense or a heat of passion defense if he hit her in the back of her head and she died. Right? So like he hit her in her head, she falls over and she's dead. And then he snaps to and is like, oh my gosh, like I killed her. And then he responds by calling the police, right? Or calling somebody and saying, oh, I don't know what just happened. I lost it. We got into an argument. I hit her. I don't even know what occurred. I think it's easier to reach a heat of passion defense. But in this case, he hits her in the back of the head. She does not die. right? The autopsy is clear. We didn't discuss the autopsy findings, but the autopsy is clear that she died from her throat being slit. So she was not dead when she when he hit her in the head. And instead of him coming to or recognizing I've made a mistake or, I've lost it, let me figure this out, he walks to the kitchen, gets a knife, and then comes back and slits her throat. And I think that invalidates any opportunity of legal insanity. It invalidates any opportunity of heat of passion, because it shows that you went to the kitchen with intent to find something to kill her, right? And then he tries to say in his interrogation with the police, and let's not call it an interrogation, let's just call it a confession because they weren't interrogating him. But in his confession, he says, and after I slit her throat, after I saw the blood, I came to. Okay? So even if we can give him a pass on going to the kitchen, getting this knife, and come back and slitting his throat, because even if we can get to the point of saying, well, maybe he really was just so hyped up off of adrenaline and alcohol that he didn't recognize what he was doing, why, when he saw the blood, in his own confession he comes to, why at that point does he cover her body with bags and stuffs her in a suitcase? You would think that a person that in a heat of passion does something crazy would at least say, okay, I'm not trying to go hide the body now. I'm not going to try to cover up this crime. I'm going to call somebody. Even if I don't call the police, I'm going to call somebody and say, oh my God, look what I have done. And I think that's why heat of passion and legal insanity in this case just doesn't seem to be a strong argument.
Ultimately, he and the state prepared to go to trial in September of 2019. But just days before his trial is set, he decides to scale the wall of his prison and escape, because he couldn't deal with it anymore. He tried to escape at least, and his escape only let him free for about 33 minutes before the police apprehended him walking down the street. He didn't even attempt to resist, and this falls in line with his character. He never resists. He tells on himself. Girl.
I just need to understand, because first of all, I want to paint this picture for you guys, right? So he is at a recreational break where they usually only get a few minutes at a to be able to go in the courtyard, and and they got guards that's sitting around watching. They may not be very close, but they're around, and you have a wall, the prison wall, that is barricaded with like wires. Okay. Now we know that Donovan is athletic because he played basketball in college. Like he's an athletic guy. But he decides, I'm going to scale this wall and get out. Now, he is able to scale this wall, and without getting one scratch on him, he gets out. But what I'm trying to understand, Steph, is how do you not at that point figure out how you're going to get away? Not that I'm saying I'm trying to make sure he gets away, but like, if you're going to do this, it seems like there's got to be some sort of plan. Like, okay, so once I scale the wall, I'm going to then run into the woods. I'm going to
take off my clothes. I'm going to take out, whatever. But that just lets you know that he's not thinking. He's like, I'm going to escape, and then I'll come up with plan B, C, D, E, F, G after.
And and to your point, that's in line with his character, mm-hmm. right? And that seems to speak truth about even what happened with Aniya. I'm going to confront her, and then when she lies, I'm going to hit her. But I don't really have plan B and C and D. I don't have what I'm going to do after this.
So as a result of this escape, he receives 17 months for felony escape, just adding to the charges. After his prison escape, his defense attorney approaches the prosecution and asks them for a possible plea deal. The prosecution was apprehensive because they had a solid case. All the evidence was in their favor, thanks to the blood evidence, thanks to Donovan's confession. Everything was all in working order. They knew they could win, and they knew that they would likely win on a first-degree murder charge. But the prosecutor decided to reach out to Aniya's family. He wanted them to weigh in on the decision, which is a great prosecutor, and they typically do that. And the family was dreading going to trial because you're forcing the family to relive those heinous moments of what happened to their loved ones. So having to live through the vivid details of their daughter, sister, niece, cousin's murder case was just too much for them. And they told the prosecutor that they prefer a plea deal than to sit through a trial. So they really had a lot of mercy on themselves and also him. And the prosecutor did as they requested, although he didn't have to because they have the option to move forward despite what the family would think or says. He offered a second-degree murder plea deal, and Donovan readily accepted. Donovan received 25 to 40 years in prison, and he will be eligible for parole.
Now, Reverend Strickland responded to the media prior to the trial starting to deny any allegations about him having a relationship with Aniya Mack. And he said, among other things, I wanted to give you a quote of what he said. He said, Aniya Mack's memory deserves to be left intact. Here is a young lady that has already lost her life and future, and now she is being denigrated to nothing more than her pastor's mistress. This is the biggest injustice of all. End quote. Now, before I go on, I just want to say I do think that that is an injustice, right, to Aniya Mack, because she was more than any possible mistake she may or may not have made. Let's be very clear. And so I thought that was pretty powerful that he said it, but I also thought it was very self-serving. Now, we'll never know definitively if Strickland had some sort of relationship with Aniya, but what happens in the dark inevitably comes to the light, and that, friends, is biblical. Just a few years later, after Aniya was murdered and Donovan was sentenced for her killing, Reverend Strickland and his wife, Jazz Monique Strickland, were arrested and charged with sex trafficking. There were several allegations against them. Now, several. And we could be here for quite some time if I detailed them all out. But I want to tell you one of the most damning of them all was that Reverend Strickland was alleged to have paid multiple teenagers between the ages of 13 and 15 years old to perform sexual acts on his wife. Now, these charges against Jazz Monique were eventually dropped due to insufficient evidence, but the prosecution was very clear to say that they believed she was guilty. They just didn't have enough evidence to hold her. However, Reverend Strickland inevitably took a plea deal and pled guilty and received 1 year of prison time. Because where there is smoke, there is fire. What's your takeaway from this case?
I think my takeaway is twofold for this case. I think that I've reviewed several cases here the past week, and some had to deal with Black people, others didn't because I watch it all. But it highlights one case in particular where a teenager, 18, 19 years old, killed a young girl in high school. And there was no real rhyme or reason why he did it. He just did it. And here we are in another scenario where they're not teenagers, but they're young adults. And here it is, Donovan thought something was fueled by alcohol and his own assumptions and couldn't have a conversation. And because of that, he ended up killing her. And so I just think that it shows that crimes, while we often do look for motives, they can be just senseless, because this is a senseless crime. It has no rhyme or reason. 2 lives were stolen, both his life and obviously Aniya's life. And it's just unfortunate to know that these senseless crimes take place. And we just must do better overall. But I think that goes without being said. Also, I think Reverend Strickland this is very concerning. And I think what it should make those of us who are a part of the Christian faith, who claim to be a part of it, you have to vet your church. You really do. You have to vet your church and allow the discernment to be the overreaching theme in when you visit a church, because he was taking advantage. He was definitely grooming Aniya. Even if he was, obviously I believe he sent that text message. That grooming behavior was in the works. He was giving her gifts. He was readying her to do some of these heinous acts in response to giving her gifts. And it's unfortunate that Donovan could not sit down and have a conversation, because maybe she would have opened up and said, hey, I don't know really what to do. And I'm just trying to, you're a college student, you broke. I'm just trying to get my bills paid.
I'm trying to get my bills paid. I don't have a relationship with him.
And you don't have the wisdom to be able to figure that out and how to navigate that. And so to know that ended in her death, it just speaks to, we're not protected. Black women are just not protected. And she couldn't go to anybody, didn't feel comfortable enough to go to anybody in her life. And then her boyfriend, who she seemed to love a lot, she was trying to tell him, and he killed her as a result. So, it's just a scary world that we live in. And I'm happy that Strickland got caught. I hope that he got put on the child sex registry. He is a child offender, because he is one. And it's sad, man, especially in lieu of the case that we covered last week about children just getting taken advantage of. And I don't care if she was 19, 20, you're still a young adult. You're naive and you are open to, manipulation. And that's what happened here.
Absolutely. I could not say it better. I don't have an additional takeaway. I think the biggest thing that I was grateful for in researching this case is to see it come full circle against, Reverend Strickland, because he tried to walk away and paint himself as being, hey, he had an excuse for everything. I wasn't involved. It wasn't me. How dare you, minimize this woman's life to something so meaningless, right? And his words were very true, and he was good with words, right? And I think that that's why you have to be careful, because these people, they're good with words. They're charismatic. They charm you. They make you feel wanted, a part of, needed, valued, and then they manipulate that and turn on that very thing. And it was nice to be able to go full circle. See, she was murdered in 2018 and 2019. Donovan was convicted. And then in 2021, these charges were brought against the Stricklands. And so, I am glad that it's kind of like justice was done, on all accounts here.
Well, that is our case for today. We hope that you guys give us some of your awesome and amazing feedback on Instagram and or on Facebook. Let us know what you think about this case. Keep sending in y'all's listener suggestions. We are definitely paying attention to those and adding them into the list. Next week is February, finally. I had to hesitate because January just goes on and on and on and on, like Erykah Badu. But it is February, so that means it's Black History Month. And MD and I are gearing up to do another giveaway. And it's actually going to be just two. And it's going to be $50 gift cards each, because we're trying to grow our socials, particularly Instagram, because our Facebook is great. But of course, you can pub that. So we'll give you guys more details about that. But until next time, share if you care with friends and family this episode. If you enjoyed it, or any other episode you enjoyed in season 7 and in season 8. Until next time, this is Murder in the Black.